So I decided to upgrade my Core 2 Duo machine just to see if aftermarket coolers really do make the difference that people are always claiming that they make. So here we go. This is with the stock Intel cooler idling at right around 40 degrees Celsius. Normally it's at about 38 or 39, but it's a little bit warmer in here today than it has been the last little while. So that accounts for the higher temperatures. So what I was going to do, I'm going to run some Prime 95 for a few seconds just to, sorry about the flicker, but obviously the refresh is a little bit different on the monitor than it is on my camera. So I can drive that up to 100% and see what the temperatures get to. It doesn't take very long, obviously, before they ramp up pretty good. Intel recommends that the maximum temperature for a Core 2 Duo, this is, I believe, an E6600. I can't remember for sure. It's the 2.4 gigahertz model anyhow. They recommend 61 degrees Celsius, but it commonly gets warmer than that, and the fan never gets to 100% utilization anyway. But it is actually spinning pretty good there, though. That 2500 RPM, I think, is about the maximum for a stock cooler. And I noticed over time, it doesn't seem to be able to hold temperature steady at maximum utilization. I think this tends to get up over 70 degrees Celsius at times. So what I did is I went to my favorite place, Newegg, and invested in a Hyper T2 cooler from Cooler Master. Actually, I bought two of these. I put one into my main gaming rig, which is, I guess you probably wouldn't call it a true gaming rig. It's an i5 3570K. But I did get a 10-degree drop in idle temperatures. So I'm really curious to see if, once I get it installed in this Core 2 Duo rig, if it'll be able to hold those temperatures down a little bit better and maybe have an even cooler idle temp. So let's get this thing unboxed here. So here's the build with the stock cooler. I call this my secondary machine just because it's not my main rig. If I'm watching a movie or something on my main rig, I sometimes like to have, another machine available that I can browse the web. So this one pretty much gets hand-me-down parts. That's my Radeon 260X that used to be in my main rig, which I upgraded to a 280. That's the Core 2 Duo, the stock sync. There's 3 gigs of RAM, 2 1s and 2 512s. I've got a couple more 1 gigs on the way. Fortunately, this board only supports a maximum of 4 gigabytes, which is really strange because it's a 64-bit processor, so you would think that they would have support for more RAM, but I've been all over Asus website, the support site. I've updated the BIOS and everything else, and all you can put in is 4 gigs. It's just a cheap SATA 80 gig drive, Hitachi Desk Star that I dug up. The whole build, this is when I reviewed those Seasonic power supplies that I was so excited about. I'd ordered a bunch of them, SS 300 ET, like I talked about. So I've been using them for better than a year now, and I can't say I have any complaints. The fans are still absolutely silent, and they don't kick in until the case gets seriously hot, which never really happens because I have air conditioning in here in the summertime. So they're wonderful power supplies. I haven't experienced any issues at all with them, and I'm gonna keep going back to them. The only machine I have that doesn't use the Seasonic is obviously, well, not obviously, but my main rig, which has a Corsair supply before I started using the Seasonics. I put this build in one of my favorite case. It's the only one I use for budget builds, also for the Pentium project I was working on, which I've actually got 3 of those machines done, so I'll be taking a look at those. But this is the Rosewell Ranger M. It's really cheap on Newegg. It does not have USB 3.0 in the front, but if you're just doing like a small office computer, home theater PC, that sort of thing, it's a very inexpensive case. It comes with a 120 millimeter fan in the back, which is nearly silent. I've never had any issues with the noise. The fans light up blue, so just to let you know, some people don't like fans that light up, but obviously you can replace it with whatever you want. I'm not sure what size that exhaust fan is. It looks like it's a 90 millimeter fan. Same thing, it's silent. I never hear a peep from it. There's no LEDs on it. It's obviously less expensive because it's it's an exhaust fan that you're never going to look at or even remember is there. So anyhow, that's the stock cooler, and this is where the T2 is going to go. Now, I took this out of its box, and when I did the first build, the first heatsink swap in my main machine, I didn't realize that these are set up from the factory so that they blow through the heatsink. I had no idea. I thought they blew away from it, so I had it all set up the wrong way. I had the airflow going towards the front of the case instead of the rear of the case. Part of that is HP's fault, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. Some people have reported having trouble with the fact that there's no instructions with this thing, like they can't figure out how to mount it. I think it's a pretty simple deal. Sorry about the glare. But what you got there, I mean, this part is obviously there's a groove there, so something needs to go there. And it's fairly simple to figure out what that might be because there are screw holes on it and matching screw holes on this clamp right here. So voila, there you go. That's how you put these clamps on. You just put the two little screws in, and these go into your motherboard, and away you go. These are the same whether it's LGA 775 all the way on up to today's Haswell and Skylake processors. So it's pretty simple for the Intel side. I don't work with AMD boards, so I don't really know how easy it is, but here's the clamp it comes with. It looks like same thing. You shouldn't really have trouble with this, guys. I mean, if you can't put one of these heat sinks on, maybe you shouldn't be messing with computers, especially high performance ones that cost a lot of money. I mean, you get your standard 4-pin cable there, plugs into your motherboard, has PWM control like any modern heatsink or like any modern cooling fan should. So I'm going to go ahead and install this bad boy. I was just about to put this in, and one thing I just noticed, and I noticed this on my other one when I was installing it. I don't know if I can get this quite on camera, but the quality control on these isn't as good as you would think from a company such as Cooler Master. Like if you look closely, there's imperfections in the machine work on these, almost like they've been knocked around at the plant post after they've been manufactured, and they're just people just aren't see, there we go. I'll get the glare out of the way. You can see that over there. These all affect the cooling capability of the heatsink, and I've seen this pointed out on different reviews on Newegg. And at first I thought they were just talking about these grooves in between the pipes, but yeah, you can see it. There's all kinds of little marks. Like this is brand new. I just pulled this out of the box over here. Like this is the packaging for it. It's a brand new, brand new part. But for some reason, yeah, there's all kinds of dings and dents and everything else. So when you're applying the thermal paste, you want to make sure that you get a fairly good solid layer across your CPU. That way when you press it down, the paste will fill in those little marks and dings and stuff and give you the cooling capability that you should have. Okay, so here we are. We're all done with the installed heatsink. Took about 10 minutes on this LGA 775 board. Again, I don't understand why people have issues, but hey, whatever. There's a couple of reasons I went with the T2 instead of the 212 Evo. Besides price, obviously the T2 is half the price of the Evo, and I'm not sure you get twice the cooling capability from the Evo. One of the reasons is size. When I did my main PC, these heat pipes are just touching the side panel of the case. With the Evo, I checked it out. It's about 0.7 inch longer than the T2. So there would actually be a bulge in my side panel if I were to have gone with the Evo. And it looks like with this Ranger M case, I would have had the same problem. It looks like this is going to be just a perfect match, and that these heat pipes are going to be resting up against my side panel once I put it on. There may even be a bulge. No, okay, no, there's a tiny bit of space between my palm and the heat pipes. So I don't know what kind of cases people are using that buy the 212 Evo, but I think there's a lot of cases that it just doesn't fit, and something like, you know, the T2 is a better option. Again, they come from the factory with the fan set up to blow through the heat sink, which makes perfect sense if you look at the way it's constructed. You can put a second one of these fans over here if you want a push-pull configuration. I think just having one blowing through is sufficient here, especially where the exhaust fan is. It's just a couple of inches from the heatsink, and it's obviously set to blow outward, unlike my my other machine, which is an OEM Hewlett-Packard case, which yeah, I'll talk about it again. Like I said, I'll talk about that later. So basically, my airflow, this is the 120 intake fan, and believe it or not, there's actually more space to work with inside this cheap little Rosewill case than there is inside my my Hewlett-Packard, which is looks like a physically bigger machine, but somehow just does not have any room inside. Again, because it's not a standard micro ATX case, I guess. I'm gonna have to do some cable management at some time, because I don't want these cables obviously touching those fan blades. I'm not sure why I didn't. Maybe I did set this behind. Oh, that's why I can't set that behind the hard drive, because the RAM chips are in the way. So I'm just gonna have to make do somehow, because this isn't long enough to route behind the board. That's for sure. I'll just have to do my best to keep it off the CPU fan. But otherwise, I had no issues getting it in there. The pins. If you do it the right way, there's a learning curve for those plastic Intel twist pins, and a lot of people break them because they're not doing it the right way. You have to be careful. You have to set the pins up exactly where they're supposed to be. You pull up on them, and you kind of twist them back and forth until they're seated in the right spot, and then you push them in, and then you turn them in the direction of the arrow, just a slight turn, because they click and they lock into place. You don't have to push all that hard, right? Because all you're doing is it's just a little spring-loaded mechanism. You're just pushing it down. So there's no reason. You don't have to force it. What you do is when you set this down, you just make sure that all four line up. Just loosely, try each one to make sure it's going to go before you, because once you've pushed one in or two in, and then all of a sudden you get to the last one and it's not lined up, and you go to push down on it, well, then you force those pins outward, and then they're just not as good as what they should be. So you do it the right way. They're just fine. They hold the cooler in place just fine. Like, it's not going to pop out of there. It isn't going anywhere. So, I mean, it could be a better setup, but, it is what it is. And it does work well if you do it the right way. So, I'm going to put the side panel back on this machine and see what kind of temperatures I get. So I've got the machine put back in its place next to my Pentium 4 build, which is one of my favorite builds. You can see the front of the Rosewill case, and so I'm going to fire this up for the first time, and hopefully everything works. Oh, I got a post beep. That's always good. I'm going to try turning this light off and see if we can get rid of that glare. There, that's better. Yeah, start Windows normally. I forgot to mention what happened when I was running that Prime 95 test. The processor overheated and locked up just before I'd shut the camera off. So it goes to show you that maybe it was time for a bigger cooler. I do have a slight overclock, but it's not a huge overclock. It's 2.4 gigahertz. I have it running at 2.6. So I mean, it's not like a big time overclock, but it heats up fast with the stock Intel heatsink. So I'm really I'm curious to see if this is going to make any difference. If you're wondering why I'm using an old CRT monitor, it's because I have my main machine set up on this LCD over here, and then this monitor, I have all my older machines connected through a KVM switch. So this just kind of, and I prefer to play older games like Doom and stuff like that on an analog monitor. I think they do better with lower resolutions than newer monitors do. So being my secondary machine, it's running through this monitor. So we're gonna this is tough to do looking through a viewfinder for some reason. So we're gonna open up hardware monitor. Oh god, yes, run it. That's why I double clicked on it. I like, this is the latest edition of hardware monitor. I think it's version 127 they called it. It's got a lot more, look at this, right off the bat, 32 Celsius. Oh, so you can hear the CPU's working, the hard drive's doing something. I don't know if you can hear it on the camera, but I can hear it grinding away down there. If this was Windows Vista, it'd still be grinding away, and CPU usage would be 100% and everything else. The machine would be carrying on, but it's pretty much done booting now. We got a 32 Celsius. So just like with my main rig, there was an automatic drop of nearly 8 degrees, almost 10 degrees Celsius. That's big time, folks. That's, that's 15 to 20 degrees Fahrenheit. Like, that's a huge drop compared to the stock heatsink and fan. So we're gonna go and we're gonna fire up Prime 95 again just to see if I can make this thing crash again. I can't believe it crashed on me like that. It was usually at least stable, even though the temperatures seem to keep on climbing. It never actually crashed on me like that with the stock heatsink. So we're just gonna get that going there. Again, this is really tough to do looking through a camera. Here we go. It's not ramping up as quickly as it did before, that's for sure. CPU fan, it's measuring 1700 RPM. The maximum RPM on that fan is 2800. So if it hasn't even maxed out, and we're running, so you can see we're at 2.6 gigahertz, 100% utilization, and look at that. 50 degrees Celsius. The maximum is 61. So we're actually 10 degrees below what Intel's recommended maximum temperature is. And remember, before, when I was running this, it was climbing up towards 70 degrees Celsius. So, yeah, obviously a $20 cooler. 20 bucks. Folks, you don't have to buy the Evo if you think it's going to be too big. Oh, another reason I didn't go with the Evo was the fact that with the Evo, you need a backplate. So it's not just price. I mean, there were other factors involved. With the Hyper T2, you don't need a backplate. It takes about 5 minutes to install. And here's the evidence right here that it works. Right off the bat, like I said, it's holding fairly steady at 51, 52. When it crashed last time, it was at 67. So you just saw it here, folks. And again, the fan hasn't quite hit its maximum. It's at 22. Where's the, I wonder if this thing measures the percentage properly. I found that a lot of the time it doesn't. Where is it? There's a spot, or there used to be, where it would say, oh, she's revving up now. And every time it does, the CPU drops a couple of degrees, so it's... Can you hear that? Oh, now it's hit, darn near hit its maximum. Every time the CPU wants to get hit 55 degrees, it seems like that fan kicks into 2800 and drops it down a couple of degrees. So it's definitely doing its job. So anyhow, I'm going to wrap this up and get this uploaded, and I'm going to start on my Pentium project videos. I've got 3 of those PCs done. The Pentium 1, Pentium 2, and Pentium 4 are all finished. I've really enjoyed them, and I look forward to doing some videos on them.